the one hand, people are spending this enormous amount of time and energy feeling everyone's suffering, just scrolling and watching TV. And it's this constant stream of tragedy. And I think some people feel that they have to feel that, that they have to feel it all in order to be caring or loving. And I think some of it is real and necessary. I think just bypassing that's probably not super helpful. But I think some of it's also its own form of, I guess, avoidance, almost like I'm going to feel the world's pain, but I never fully come in and feel my own specific pain. It's almost easier to have all this empathy for other people, to feel their deep pain and feel compassion without having to face our own wounds, our own pain, our own past. Hello, everyone. Nice to be back with you. I want to talk a little bit about something that's been happening in the spiritual world right now. I actually wrote some notes about this about 3 weeks ago, and then I just couldn't believe all the things that have been happening. And so I decided not to record it until now. And I'm glad I didn't, because I'm actually sort of surprised to see everything that I'm seeing that's happening. And one of the things that I see is spiritual teachers and personal growth leaders and influencers and authors who are being called out. Now, a lot of this has to do with the Epstein files and Deepak Chopra, but so much more has come out since then about people talking about the ways that these people have acted so differently, say, behind closed doors compared to teaching on stage, maybe how they act with their families or their employees, and the difference between that and what they teach. And I'm definitely not talking about like one or two isolated incidences. It seems to me like there's a pattern, and maybe what we could call is a reckoning. People are out there pulling back the curtains. They're sharing what they witnessed. And honestly, it's shocking if it's true. Things like rage behind closed doors, their unprocessed trauma, the way that they talk about something like peace or unconditional love and then tear people apart. And they go on stage and completely tell a different story of what just happened. A story as if they handled something so perfectly when they actually handled it unconsciously and unkindly, and maybe worse. It's not just that, though. It's other things too that are pretty shocking. What happens is there's this performance that they're showing or giving, and privately, their lives are either falling apart or a mess or really deeply problematic. And honestly, I think it matters. Let me just be clear, this isn't anything to do with me taking pleasure in other people's downfall. I mean, I'm not even telling you people's names because it doesn't really seem that important in what I'm trying to say here. And because it wasn't my personal experience, so I don't really feel that it's mine to share. And by the way, I want to talk about this in the context of my own personal life and my own experience because I understand it. I actually understand the impulse around this. And I think I even understand what's happening, though I'm not really going to get into the psychology or picking it apart in any specific cases. But I think what the problem is this performative way of being, this way that people are getting up and pretending to have transcended their humanity. And I think it's causing harm to people. I think that there are so many reasons why, right? There's the lack of integrity. There's the way that we're looking to somebody to teach us something that they're not even embodying for themselves. And is it true that many, many people teach what they have to learn for themselves? 100%. I can say that's been my journey for sure. But the question is, do we have to pretend that we have it all together in order to be admired and respected, or do we need to share the journey? And I kind of think that we need to share the journey, but I also understand how people in the world, us, we seem to look for people we can put on a pedestal. We seem to look for people who have it all together and who are perfect. And that's who we look up to, and that's who we admire, the ones that kind of have the godlike way about them. But I just don't think this is what people are looking for anymore. And I think it's been to the detriment of people. I think we are watching people fall off their pedestals. And I think it's a call for us to step fully into our own leadership and to look at the ways where we have put ourselves on a pedestal or where we are expecting ourselves to live on a pedestal rather than embracing our humanity. And I think that when we are performative and when we do pretend to have transcended our humanity and we act one way on the outside, but then we are feeling a different way on the inside, or we act one way with the public, but then we act differently, say with our family, it causes these inner splits and it causes us to feel guilt and shame out of integrity. It really is a dishonest way of living. And for people who are in leadership, and probably for all of us, it's not just a problem to the people that we cause harm to and that these leaders are causing harm to directly, but it's also causing harm to everyone else who internalizes the message that spiritual growth and healing becomes someone who no longer struggles or who no longer feels or who's no longer impacted by other people or their past. And it's not true. So I want to share with you today a little bit about where I stand on all of this, about me, and about some of the things that I've been afraid to say. What has been really interesting for me is that I have been afraid to share something about the way that I look at the world. And I realize why now. I realize that part of the reason why I've been hesitant to share it is because there's some part of me that questions whether there's a performative or armored up piece to this. And what I think I've concluded is that I just hold multiple truths. But let me tell you about what I do deeply believe and how I live my life in many, many regards. But I also want to call myself out. I want to call myself out on it. And it feels like now is the most risky time to share this because, in many ways, what people are calling out is spiritual bypass, is this way that people are using um, spiritual concepts and ideas to negate their human experience or to suppress their human experience or to transcend their human experience. Nonetheless, I'm going to share that I do genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that what we experience in the world, whether that be joy and love and connection, or whether that's suffering, conflict, and tragedy, that they're all part of the soul's curriculum and that we are all here evolving. Our souls are evolving, and that Earth is like a school for us, that we come into this school and we experience certain things. Do I believe that people create their own suffering or that when something bad happens to them, that it's karmic or something like that? No, not necessarily. I don't. I think it's maybe more like that everything is happening. Some things maybe even more random, but that we can extract from everything a learning, that we can grow and learn by everything that we see. Now, I do believe that everybody is a messenger and a mirror for us. I do believe that is one of the best ways that we can come into wholeness is to see ourselves projected in the world. I do believe that some of the things that happen in our life are there for us and for our growth. And I do believe that some of the hardest things that a person need to go through are part of something larger than we can see from where we are standing as a human. I think some of the things we're going through right now in our world, the fact that many of the same things are happening in different countries, tells me that there's something bigger happening. And I do believe that. And that does give me peace. I'm not going to deny that that gives me peace. And sometimes it even allows me to feel less anguish about the world. Not because I don't feel bad for individual people and for what they're going through, and not because I wish it to be this way, because there are many, many things I do not wish to be this way. But I do believe that there is a much bigger evolution that's happening. And it's been happening since microbes, I could probably totally mess this up, became like lichens on rocks extracting nutrients from a rock, to the evolution of the microbes and us turning into more fully formed functional beings and then continuing to evolve. And I do believe, and I understand that not everybody's going to agree with me, but I have a podcast episode coming out about that we are a more barbaric world than we like to admit, that we are not as peaceful as we wish and believe ourselves to be. And would I like to be a more peaceful world? 100%. Would I like for things that are happening right now to not be happening? Oh my God, yes. But sometimes you got to be honest about the world we live in. And we live in a world that is still evolving. We are still living largely from our amygdala, from our fear brain. We have not fully evolved into the prefrontal cortex and being able to make clear decisions and be responsive rather than reactive to the world. We have a tremendous amount of unhealed trauma that we carry collectively and individually that has not been healed. And so, what I'm trying to say is that I genuinely believe that we are still in deep evolution and that we are not as far along as we would like ourselves to be. So, I don't sit down and get consumed by sadness and anguish over everything. Now, don't get me wrong, I have felt a deep amount of pain and it has been incredibly dysregulating for me to be around all that's happening around the Epstein files and the level of abuse and the horrifying things that happened. It's been hard. But because I don't weep at every news cycle and get upset about every single thing that's happening all across the entire world, I've spent years wondering if that makes me cold and unfeeling, if there's something wrong with me. I think the one that gets me the most, though, is that I wonder, am I spiritually bypassing? Am I using big soul ideas to avoid sitting with pain? And the truth is, I am going to say probably. There's probably some truth to that. I think everybody that is on the spiritual journey has spiritual bypassed before. And I think it's an important thing to watch out for. I do. Yeah. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about this with you about how I'm choosing to navigate this. But I haven't spoken as much publicly about my perspective on the soul and soul contracts and things like that, because I think there's a part of me that does worry that people will call me out, that I'll be one of those teachers. And I don't mean the ones that are on stage that are completely living out of integrity. That's not what I mean. First of all, I'm not even famous enough for you to know that or think that about me, but I don't believe that about myself. I do believe I absolutely value integrity, but I worry that I would get called out as one of those ones that talks about love and oneness, but is somehow like disconnected from real suffering and then even more so disconnected from my own suffering. And I'm going to just say this. What I think one of the most important things is right now is to acknowledge places where we might be spiritually bypassing, where we aren't in full integrity. And my truth is that I think there's some truth to it. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, though. I think you can hold soul beliefs, you can hold spiritual beliefs, and still remain connected to your humanity and the humanity of others. But my whole honest truth is that my work has always been to peel back those layers of the walls and the armor and the guarding to open up to the more tender, soft heart of mine. That is the truth. So I'm not surprised that I'm drawn to these soul concepts, but I also think they're true. It's a little bit of both. And then we'll add one more component to it is that I deeply desire not to suffer. And I think a lot of people suffer by the way that their brain goes into judging things as good and bad, evil and loving, and kind of this pushing up against the reality of the world. And I feel that we suffer for a lot of reasons that I choose not to engage in. And maybe someone would call that spiritual bypass. And maybe I'll later in my life discover that this was bypass. But I think it's complex. And I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to have it all figured out and that after this one podcast episode, I and you will have all the answers. It's not that I'm really grappling with something. And I'm just owning that I don't have an answer and that you may not have answers and that it's okay. And some people are trying to now make this a tidy little thing, like that spiritual bypass looks like this, and then you need to act like this, and you need to do it this way. And what I would say that is that at the core, what that is spiritual perfectionism. It's some idea that what was spiritually perfect before was this idea of how to transcend humanity. But now it's like the spiritual perfect thing is to be in your humanity. Just notice that. Notice that we're always being called to something else. And I want you to be expansive enough to hold it all. I want you to be expansive enough to not shame yourself for having spiritual concepts that seem to really lead you in a positive way, or to looking at the soul as the part that holds your humanity and allowing yourself to see life as earth school for your soul's evolution. That's okay. But you don't have to negate your humanity. But by being in touch with your humanity and really tapping into your feelings and the experience of being here and being alive doesn't also have to negate your soul experience. You are not wrong. Wherever you are, you're not wrong. I'm not wrong. I am learning and evolving and growing. And the only difference between where I was yesterday and today, or 3 weeks ago and today, is that I'm just sharing it with you. Don't get me wrong, I have appreciated seeing some of the unveiling of the contradiction that's happening out there. Helps me to feel more human, makes me feel more confident that I can share some of this with you. But let me just keep going. I want to tell you a little bit more because, um, as I said before, the question that I do sit with is this question of, am I cold? And wondering into the difference between this concept of genuine transcendence, which I do believe that there are people like monks that maybe their soul has evolved so far that they are really closer to being a soul or spirit or in the astral plane than they are to the human experience. I think that happens. I do. And I don't think that that makes them wrong or bad. I think that is the evolution. I think that we start out as a soul coming into a body in a deeply human experience, experiencing the suffering and the hard stuff of being human. And then I think as we evolve over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes, we do evolve to be closer to our soul experience. I do believe that. I do. But I also think it's important to watch for the difference between that type of genuine transcendence and protective distance and coping mechanisms and ways that we look at the world through soul and spiritual language to keep us from having to really fully be in life, to be in the midst of difficult, messy, complicated relationships and dynamics. And I know for a very long time, most everything was protective distance for me. But now I think that some stuff is still protective distance, but I have done a tremendous amount of work to lean into the discomfort, to lean into the messiness. And I think I'm much more comfortable than I ever was before. But is it possible that I still have places where I'm numb? I think it's possible. I think we end up experiencing some level of peace by staying above or outside the fire that burns in the world or in our relationships or in whatever struggles that we're having. And I think that really probably a genuine transcendence or like the sense of maybe a level of being in the world but not being consumed by the world comes by being in the fire and walking through the fire. But the thing is that both of these things can look identical from the outside. They can. They can even sometimes feel identical on the inside, especially if we're numb. So both of them can produce a sense of calm or maybe peace. And both of them allow you to hold a broader view, a wider view, to say, oh, this is all part of something larger. And it can sound like wisdom, but they do come from different places. And this is the part that I'm grappling with, is knowing that I think I probably have both. And I probably just have to acknowledge and own that I am expansive enough to allow them both to exist and aware enough to watch out for the protective distance and the way that it keeps me from being fully alive, fully in my experience, connected in my relationships, open hearted, loving, touched by life. For me, I love to go up and have a wider view, but that altitude can be an escape hatch for me. It can be a way that I rationalize things and I don't have to feel. So that's my truth. I don't always know which is operating in me. I think I tend to be more aware of it now than ever, especially as I've been grappling with this more and being more willing to share it with you. I know for sure that there are many things in my wide, nuanced view that is real and earned, and that there is a chance that something could be operating in me that is more about being like a sophisticated version of a little girl, a wounded little girl who learned a long time ago that rising above my experience was safer than being in it. So I'll tell you just briefly how this started for me. That when I was young, probably 4 or maybe younger, I was sexually abused by a family member. It's not exactly the thing I try to lead with, but I think it's something that is important to share because honestly, that's where I learned to rise above my experience. And by the way, isn't it so interesting that sometimes the deepest wound that we experience, it gives us the gifts of the things that we're able to do. I remember Wayne Dyer used to talk about that. I don't exactly remember what happened to in his childhood. Was he put up for adoption or something? But whatever it was, he had a rough childhood. And he said that it taught him self reliance and that he teaches people self reliance. I think for me, one of the things is that I learned to have a broader view and a higher view and a more soul perspective view. And it is helpful. I can teach people, I can help people to elevate themselves out of the muck and in the weeds and to find what it is that they deeply desire and be able to take action toward that. It is a wonderful thing. I can show people where they're stuck and see the places where their healing still hasn't been integrated. But it came possibly from wounding. So when I was violated in these ways, it left me confused and scared and frozen, and I became hypervigilant. I wasn't protected by other people. I told somebody, they didn't believe me, and they said they'd keep me safe. But honestly, I'll tell you what happened to me at that time was something inside of me rose up and was like, wait a second, you think you need to protect me here? No, no, no. This will never happen again because if he ever tries to do that again or anyone does, I will handle it myself. I actually said, I'll punch him in the face. I was 12. And honestly, that was a big moment in my life because in order for me to have that level of bravado, I had to believe that no one was coming, that I had to be my own protector, and that being soft and vulnerable is dangerous. And needing help means being not only weak, but being abandoned, that people weren't going to come, that I was not worth the effort. Now, I'm going to just say that I think she was pretty freaking amazing. And I'm really proud of her for doing what she did. I'm proud of myself. I'm really proud of myself. But I also learned something that became invisible to me, which was that feeling fully was dangerous. And being present in my own experience in my own body was when the worst things happened. And that the safest place was really above the experience, looking down at it, making meaning of it, understanding it, rather than being inside it. And that happened to me in other times too. And a lot of it was my mom. She helped me to look at things from that perspective. When I was being bullied, I remember her actually asking me to have compassion for these girls who were bullying me because they came from such a bad life. I mean, the only people who would hurt me so badly would be people who are so miserable themselves. And so I was there having compassion for my bully, even though I was in the midst of this horrific situation. So then I grew up and I built a framework that I didn't even know I built. It was really hard earned and genuine, but I was able to see things from this really broad view with lots of nuance to understand suffering better, to even appreciate suffering, to see the meaning behind suffering. And that at some level, everything that happened to me was here for my own evolution. That even the hardest things that happened to me made me into me. Now, there are times, I'm not going to lie, Or I also feel some deep grief for the way that my life might have gone had I not been harmed. And I deeply desire that children do not get harmed the way that I did or the way that any children in the world get harmed. I think we treat children poorly. I think that we dominate them, and I think that we have to do better. So, this is not me saying that I think that the behaviors of the world or myself are justified or okay, but I do believe that everything is here for us to learn and grow if we want to take advantage of it. And I don't think my framework is really wrong, actually. I believe it still deeply. I'm just trying to expand myself to see, and I have been for the past 15 years or 20 years, that the ways that I can rationalize the world or see suffering or look at spiritual teachings are part of it all. And there is wisdom in them, but also some of it's my wounding. And that being more connected to my humanity and to opening my heart and softening to be brave enough to be in this world that has harmed me in many ways is my deepest life's work. But using the way that I am a soul here, having a life experience to help me along that path has been absolutely imperative. I don't know that I could have done as much growing and healing without knowing that I am more than my human experience. So that's why I think that it's kind of a both and type of a thing. I will say I also believe that we live in a culture that's deeply confused about grief and pain. I know that I have been deeply confused about grief and pain. I think on the one hand, people are spending this enormous amount of time and energy feeling everyone's suffering, just scrolling and watching TV. And it's this constant stream of tragedy. And I think some people feel that they have to feel that, that they have to feel it all in order to be caring or loving. And I think some of it is real and necessary. I think just bypassing that's probably not super helpful. But I think some of it's also its own form of, I guess, avoidance, almost like I'm going to feel the world's pain, but I never fully come in and feel my own specific pain. It's almost easier to have all this empathy for other people, to feel their deep pain and feel compassion without having to face our own wounds, our own pain, our own past. I wonder if that's at all landing for you. I have said before, and I know I can get into trouble when I say this, that I think some of the people who are empaths, deeply empathic people, they often project their deep pain and grief onto other people and feel it so deeply, but they're not necessarily even accurate. I have had empaths actually say things to me that about my pain that I'm like, honestly, that's not how I feel about it. I think that might be how you feel about it. No, it's not lost on me that it's possible that they're picking up on feelings that I'm not feeling. I'm going to give that that's a possibility, but it's also possible that they're expressing feelings that they have never expressed for themselves in their deeply personal, specific pain. And they are able to see it in other people, but they're not able to feel their own pain. Okay. But we also have the other people, the ones that are completely checked out. They feel nothing, engage with nothing, protect themselves from every single bit of it. And I'm just going to say that I think that I don't probably tend to be on the side of just scrolling and feeling everyone suffering. But I think I used to be a little bit more on the not really feeling the feelings of other people. And I feel like there's a third place. And I think that's where the most honest spiritual work lies. It's the place where we acknowledge that suffering is real and that we don't want to bypass it, that there is value and importance in feeling, that we feel some of the suffering that's around us. I think the most important thing that we can do is feel our own pain, our own suffering, our own grief. And I think we have to hold that it's part of something larger. And I'm going to add one other thing to this, and then I want to talk about that more. I also think we have to hold that in the darkness, there's always light. So maybe there's a trifecta here. Maybe it's not a both and, it's like a both and. It's an and. Because I was talking to a friend and I told her that I was going down the rabbit hole and it's been kind of dark. And I've been really in this negative place of what world do we live in? Like, what is going on? And so dark. And I can't believe all these things were happening and that hundreds of young girls were so violated and abused. And it wasn't just that. There were a lot of things that were just coming to the surface of how much bad there is in the world. And she said, I think it's time for you to come out of the rabbit hole. You've been feeling and you've been in the pain, but now it's time to come out of the rabbit hole and see the light because there's also a lot of wonderful, beautiful things happening in the world. And it's important that we don't get too sucked into the dark, nor do we negate the dark and get only in the light. That's what spiritual bypass is. It's kind of this idea that like love and light people, just hold the love and light. And I think that that's probably just as damaging as being only in the dark. So that's my first thing I'll say is I think that there's too many people identifying and only seeing the dark. And our reticular activating system is this really interesting part of our brain that whatever we're looking for, we see more of. And if you're on social media, the algorithm will do it for you too. So if you're looking for the darkness and all the pain and all the bad things, you will just see more and more and more of it. But if you look for the light, you will find it. And you have to be willing to find the light. And that's a balance. I also believe that there's a personal life that's happening. There are deeply personal things we are suffering. There's grief, there's pain, but there's also something bigger happening. And I don't think it's bypassed to acknowledge and own that there's something bigger happening. I don't think it's bypassed. I think it's beautiful. I think holding that there might be a bigger plan for us, that maybe even the things that happen that seem so dark and so hard actually lead to something else. Sometimes we have to go through the darkness and the hard times in order to get to something better or to learn something or to grow. And I don't just mean individually, I mean as a humanity. I mean as a could even be like a country. Now, one of the other ways that I do something that other people could see as bypass, but I don't see it as bypass at all, it is that I only focus on the things that I have the power to change. So if something is happening in this world and I literally have no power to change it, I can go speak out. I could be outraged. I can be enraged. I can get mad with my friends. I can hate on people. I can do all this stuff. It's not going to change very much. I'm not a person who goes out and protests and does that stuff. That's not going to happen. But what I can do and what I do is my own personal work and my work to help empower other women. And one of the pieces of my work I consider to be absolutely dismantling oppression, dismantling the patriarchy, dismantling all of the dominant ways of being, one woman at a time. That's what I do. I don't have the power to change so many of these things that are out there. So the way I look at it is I don't have the power to change it. And I am not going to spend a tremendous amount of time and energy sitting steeped in it and being upset and feeling powerless. It will steal from my ability to be able to do the work that I am doing in the world. It will take me down, and I don't want it to take me down. I'm so thankful for my friend who was able to see that I was down a rabbit hole and probably stealing from my energy and my ability to make the difference where I can, which is in the people that I touch in my daily life, the way that I treat people, my own space to do my own inner work, the clients that I work with, the things that I create. And I have to be centered in myself in those ways. So, yes, suffering is real. No, we don't have the control and power to do as much as we'd like to. Yes, there's darkness, and yes, there's light. Yes, there's a bigger plan, and there's also personal pain. It's all true. Now, Viktor Frankl is one of my favorite authors. He's a Holocaust survivor. He wrote the book, A Man's Search for Meaning, and he did, in some ways, transcend suffering. But he did it by being in the fire. He lost everything. He went through some of the worst things imaginable. My guess is that he felt a lot of feelings before he got to the place where he could find meaning. And he was able to say that, and I'm paraphrasing, that you can steal my dignity and you can steal the people around me. You can steal everything from me. But what you cannot change is the way I think about a situation. And he decided that he was going to think about his situation differently. And he found meaning in touching the people's lives who are around him, in connecting with people, in choosing rather than to react with anger and or defeat or numbness, that he would open his heart and respond to this situation in the best way he could by touching the people's lives around him. Imagine if rather than transcending, we deepen into how can we show up in a world that is as insanely crazy as it is, most in integrity with ourselves, being as helpful and loving and caring as we possibly can. So that's why I'm saying this is not about rising above, and this isn't about either or. This is not about wallowing. It's really a way of feeling and experiencing the world, mostly feeling and experiencing your own deepest feelings, grieving, and also holding wider view, allowing space for the dark and the light, allowing space for the suffering and the bliss. It's all there. And that's what I'm reaching for. And now, full disclosure, I'm definitely not always there. Okay. I'm definitely not. Sometimes the wide view might be escape, and sometimes spending time going down the rabbit hole is exactly what I need. But I think that the key thing for me is to continue to pay attention and to call myself out and to see, am I standing on steady ground where I'm present in the hard thing? Or am I distancing myself? Am I slightly removed? I had a conversation with someone recently, and I was talking about a specific situation. And then I was sharing my soul's view, my soul perspective on it. And my friend kind of pushed back a little bit and said, I know you really well. And I just wonder, is there something in here that this is touching that you're afraid to go toward? And I kind of said, nah, no, I don't really think so. And then I went for a walk and I started to see, oh my goodness, yes, my protector part is there. And what this was touching on was related to my sexual abuse, that my mind is the most sophisticated escape hatch that I have, that I can go up to like ideas and creating or philosophizing or processing. So I was brought in this conversation to the edge of something, which was grief that I hadn't really let myself feel. And I'm not talking about grief for the world or for the Epstein files girls or abstractly in some way, but really for me, for my little girl, for my own innocence and the trust that I lost for others, even for myself, and my tenderness, my tender, soft heart, my loss of my no, my knowing my no, and then being able to speak my no, and to feeling safe in my own body. I lost those things. And so I've been spending time realizing how much I had bypassed a lot of that and how much I was numbing. I was doing things like comparing my pain to others who had it worse or moving right into meaning making. I was pointing to all the inner work that I had done and turning my thoughts into action, all the ways that I've built this great life because of my wounding. And it's all real and true, but it was also keeping me from going to a deeper layer. And what's really interesting is a lot of the work that I do is around inner child reparenting. And I've done a lot of somatic work, but this is a little different for me. This is about grief. This is about really just being with what I lost. And I would say this is some of the hardest work I've done. And I can get close to it and I can feel some of the tears, but then sometimes they just kind of go back in again. So I've been having to titrate it and do it slowly. I don't want you to think there's anything wrong or bad if you are tapping into new layers. Sometimes new things happen and they open up new wounds, new layers. And I am arriving at new levels of healing because I think this is what honest spiritual work looks like. It's not about somehow being complete or having arrived or being polished. It can be a polished teaching because sometimes that's helpful for other people to understand. But I think it's okay to admit that even though you're teaching this and even though you learned it at this level, that there might be another level that's available to you and you just don't know it. And to be humble enough to know. happens in layers, that you might rediscover a new place where you have self protection or numbing or guarding, and that's okay. That does not make you wrong or bad. And it's actually okay to even admit it. And so I've been thawing and I continue to thaw, and I've come a long way. There are places in me that I had completely frozen off, and now I have so much more warmth and movements and feeling. I'm so proud of what I've done. And I know that there's more. There's more melting to do, more places where I'm still guarded, more armor that I have around my heart that maybe I just haven't peeled away yet. This doesn't feel like a confession of failure to you. In fact, it actually is really feeling good because I spent so long, not so much even in a spiritual way, but like my life is together. I've got it together. I know best. I can give you the best advice. And this allows me to just feel a little bit less like I have to hold it all together. Like I have some identity I have to uphold. This is my life's work, not just the work I do with clients, but this is my life's work for me and every woman I walk with. So I think deep down inside, I've always known that my work is how to learn to love better, how to remove the barriers to love, how to soften. Rumi knew this. Rumi talks about that. It was never about finding love, it was always about removing the barriers that we've so carefully built to protect ourselves. And I know that I want to, and I do feel more touched by life and moved by things in life than I've ever felt before. I honestly don't want to be a person who's just caught up in all the pain and the suffering all the time. I don't actually think that that's healthy. I think it's the other end of numbness. I think there's some level of discernment. I think there's some level of compartmentalization. I don't think those are bad things. I think they're healthy mental health things to learn. But I also think that there's a difference between discernment and compartmentalization and cutting off from numbing, avoiding, you know. Probably the biggest, deepest thing we all want is to feel more alive and to be more connected in our relationships, to feel loved, to feel love, to be able to give and receive. I don't know. Those are things I want. So I was saying to you that there have been many, many years of my life where I was the person who looked like I had everything together. And that's because I had these walls up. As a little girl, I had to put up walls to feel safe in the world. And I armored up. And I don't blame myself at all for choosing to do those things unconsciously. Because remember, these are unconscious things that we chose. But I know that I want those layers to soften and to melt. Here's what I think is really interesting. And this was probably the thing that surprised me the most. I have videos that are in the Whole Soul Way about that everyone and everything is a mirror and a messenger for us. And that is actually so cool because when you realize that, you can learn so much just by your interactions with other people. But what I didn't think about, but that I saw here was when I notice places that I kind of feel like I should be moved by it, it should maybe hurt, or I should feel something and I don't. Or like when I look at someone else's pain and I can kind of see it from the distance, like there's like a glass between us. And I think I can tune into that. That's some form of numbing. I have some frozen part in me. Maybe I even wonder, am I being cold? For all this time, I have not seen that as a trailhead home to myself, as an entry point. I've just seen it as a flaw. Like I've shamed myself. I've made myself wrong and bad for it. So if I can take away the layer of being wrong and bad, what if I can just see it as an opportunity, an invitation? What about if I can look at those and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much, universe. I am seeing in another person that which I'm not able to access in me right now. I see their pain, but I can't feel their pain. This is another place for me to go deeper, to soften, to thaw, to let go of the armor. So I'm inviting all of us to say, wait a second, instead of judging ourselves, saying things like, what kind of person doesn't feel for that? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, how can I be doing this work and I don't feel feelings around this? I'm seeing these frozen places as my map, as my trailhead, the place that I can let it guide me. I can tell myself, oh, thank you. I must be ready to heal this because I wouldn't be even noticing this otherwise. I wouldn't even be aware of it happening. If it wasn't ready for me to heal, I wouldn't even judge myself. I wouldn't even notice it was happening. Someone would be feeling something, I'd either feel it or not, and I'd move on. But once I go to the place of criticizing myself for it or thinking that I should be feeling these feelings, I'm like, oh, thank you. There's something here for me. If I can come in and feel it inside of me and heal this inside of me, then the next time I will access what's happening in the present moment. I will be able to feel my own feelings and be able to hold the other person's experience with much more expansiveness than right now, maybe even just pretending, like trying to pretend compassion for them because I think I should, instead of feeling empathy for someone, instead of being able to feel something that is more like I'm more in touch with inside of myself. So the questions that I've been working on asking myself is really, what does this coldness know that I don't yet know? What is it protecting me from feeling? Imagine if the numbness, the coldness, the frozenness is just a way that I protected myself. There's nothing wrong or bad, just a little young me is scared and experiencing pain. And so the question is, am I ready, even just a little bit ready, to let it begin to thaw? Not necessarily even the feelings themselves, but like, what is it in there? Like the not feeling part of me. This is the invitation to go layer by layer and get curious. So if you notice yourself judging yourself for being too cold or you're not feeling feelings that you think you should be feeling, this is your entry point. You can look for, where is this in me?
I wanted to just come back on and end with something. We are all imperfect. There are no human beings who are just like full on spiritually evolved that I know of. Maybe there are some, but like for the most part, we're all imperfect. And honoring and acknowledging our imperfections, our flawed ways, our quirkiness, the ways that we are doing the best we can to show up, the ways that our nervous system protects us, our coping mechanisms, our defense strategies, they're part of being human. Yes, it's true. I think our work is to unhook from them and not be so locked into our ego's defensive ways to, I call it being more soul-led, healing our past, not letting our conditioning run the show, not letting fear win. I think those are all awesome things that can be incredibly useful, and they certainly are part of my path. And I also know that we are a human and we are spirit, we are soul, we are something bigger than ourselves. We're interconnected. I think you could say we are all one. But there are ways that we can also use those ideas and those concepts to excuse behaviors that need accountability, to justify things, to rationalize things, to let ourselves and others off the hook. We can absolutely have compassion. We can honor people's flaws, and we can also hold each other and ourselves accountable. Those are not mutually exclusive. And I think that to some degree, when we see a leader and we want them to be perfect, we want them to be evolved, we want them to be this leader who we can look up to and who holds themselves to a high standard and lives in integrity. We desire that so much. So much of that ends up putting this inadvertent pressure on that person to uphold that identity too, and to perhaps not feel comfortable being able to reveal the parts of themselves that don't fit the identity that perhaps they, at some point, and the audience that follows them wants for them. And so my invitation is for us all to allow more of our humanity to show. And I don't mean that in the sense of allow our bad behavior to show, but that's kind of part of it. But not so much like, oh, just be free, just act however you want and have no regard for your impact on other people. But I also think there's a level of tenderness and sensitivity that we can have to that we're imperfect, that we're doing the best we can. We are really trying, that we live in an imperfect world and that we are surrounded by imperfection and flaws. And we're also surrounded by amazing gifts and beauty and awesomeness. And maybe even our imperfections and flaws, they're not bad. They're really not bad. They're just ways that we are that are different than other people. So I spent most of my life never wanting to be seen as anything but perfect. That was a delusion. But that's what I thought. I'm like, I've got it together. I'm faster, quicker, more efficient, more effective, have better ideas, have better ways of doing things. And it showed up a lot in my marriage, especially around parenting, around running the house, and all of that. And then I basically created this awful pattern in my marriage where I did everything and my husband didn't do as much because I didn't even really create space for that because I wanted it done a certain way. And so I am humbled. I'm humbled more than I've ever been before. And looking at other people and seeing these leaders who were perfect. It's not that I'm here saying, oh, tisk tisk, you imperfect person. Look at you. You went up there and acted like you were spiritually perfect, but you're not. I don't feel that way. I feel like it's almost just a next level of evolution for us to get to where we don't have to have spiritual perfectionism. We don't have to have any perfectionism. We can honor our humanity, but we also can be reaching for spiritual heights and to understand things from a more spiritual perspective. And all of it can be true. Our humanity and our divinity both can coexist. So that's, I'm going to leave it right now. And then I think I'll come back and share a little more in another part two of this.
Okay, I think I'm going to bring this to a close for today. There's more to say about all of this, but I think I'm going to wrap this up right now and make a part two. So I'm excited to share with you part two in another episode. All right, take care.